Rebar. What is going on, guys? Time to work on the rebar of the MP. So what we've got here is a D40 tow bar. So I'm gonna make sure first that it actually bolts up onto the NP300 without having to do any modifications. That's the first thing, and at least you guys will know then if you can use a D40 tow bar. It's like the NP300 ones, they come right down into like this V. It's an off-road vehicle. Why have this big thing hanging down the back of the departure angle of the car? The D40 one makes a crap load more sense, guys. So that's gonna be what goes on the back of this thing. The moment of truth, guys, D40 tow bar and an NP300. Oh, come on, you're gonna fit. Well, the top ones are lining up, and well, the bottom ones on that side. 1, 2, 3, you bloody ripper. I wouldn't have guessed it. I was thinking it was gonna be a few bolt holes out or just not quite matching, but that is a direct fit. D40, Navara, tow bar, direct fit onto an MP300. Ew! This is the size of the tube that I'm going to be using for the rear bar and all of the bar work on the car, in fact. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it up against the car here. It's going to sit roughly somewhere about there, height-wise. So all of this tow bar, receiver, hitch receiver down here is basically too low. It's going to be pointless of me doing a rear quarter cut on this setup, on this tub, and having the tow bar down here. It's just going to defeat the purpose completely. So I'm going to have to cut this centerpiece out of this tow bar and mount it in further and mount it up higher. Cue grinding montage. So I've cut the side brackets off the main body of the tow bar, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to try and orientate them back onto the chassis in order to get the tow bar sitting up higher. I've played around with a few different positions after chopping them off, and it really seems like flipping these brackets from one side of the vehicle to the other and upside down, basically, it's about there, like that, means that the tow bar is going to sit higher and further in as well. So I will have to re-drill a hole up the top here in order to go into the side bolt on the chassis. What you'll notice as well is that receiver in the tow bar is hanging down really low still. That's going to drag on the ground and hold me up. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut it out of the position that it's sitting in now. I'm going to take a section out of the center of the tow bar and I'm going to recess it back in. And then I'm going to weld it all back in as a one-piece design and a high clearance design as well. That means though, if I'm towing something like a normal trailer or something like that, I will need to get myself a drop hitch. So a tow hitch that drops down, comes out of the tow bar, drops down like that. Once I've finished doing what I'm doing here, it's going to be sitting quite high. That's exactly what we want, guys. We want a high clearance tow bar situation that isn't going to hang us up off-road.
I just bought a new whip. Spend a couple thousand just to cruise it. Shawty said she love me, but I swear she never prove it. I never tell her, but I put it in the music. Well, that's okay. All I wanna do is make the best of my whole day.
Alright, now it's time to clean up the center section so that I can cut the hole, ready for the receiver to go in, then weld it all together, and then it's done.
We can be friends if you wanna. We can just talk if you wanna. We can hold hands if you wanna. Hey, tell me what you wanna do. We could just laugh if you wanna. Late nights on the stars if you wanna. We could just kiss.
Quick tip, guys, if you're using an angle grinder to do a square edge cut and you find that you can't get to the edge without overcutting using a cutting disc, what you can do is you can grab yourself a center punch and a drill with a drill bit and drill a hole in the corner. That way you can use the angle grinder with a cutting wheel to go all the way up to that hole that you've drilled, and you'll be left with a perfect radius and no overcuts in the corner.
Love, you a real chameleon. Get the flex, flip it straight, always on repeat. Like, we could be friends if you wanna. We could just talk if you wanna. We could hold hands if you wanna.
So I've just ripped back the metal on the surface there with the flapper disc on the grinder. I got it back to a point where the actual weld itself is now pulling away from the surface of the tow bar, and you can actually see underneath there that there's a little bit of rust starting, so some contaminants were obviously trapped underneath the weld when it was done, and some moisture, and that can cause rust. So it's good to hit that with a flapper disc as well and really smooth off that surface. So I've finished sanding down the tow bar now. I've got it pretty much ready to weld up, it's currently upside down, but this is kind of where it's at. So I've got the sides on here, they're all sanded down, ready to go. Got the center in, so you can see what I was talking about by recessing it into the actual tow bar itself. So I'll go ahead and weld that into the center there. That pretty much shows you what I was talking about when I was sort of mentioning about doing a high clearance tow bar where the center receiver goes into the tow bar itself. Pretty much all of the good full drive tow bars on the market are doing that. So the high clearance is a must, I think, for a four-wheel drive, especially when you've gone to the extent of doing a tub chop. You're pretty much trying to get as much clearance as possible. So you need to do the same with anything that's bolted to the back, otherwise it just completely defeats the purpose. Righty-o, we've got a digital angle finder here, so it's got a magnetic base and you can stick it to any steel surface and get your flat surface angle. Basically, we just need to stick that onto this flat metal surface of the tow bar, hit the 0, and then I can put it onto the tow hitch receiver, and that should zero out. Perfect, so I know that that is level with the tow bar itself. Now I'll just pop it onto the side of the hitch as well, and that should be 90, and there it is, dead on 90. So I know that that center hitch receiver is square to the tow bar, so I can go ahead and tack weld that into place now, and then I can put it up in the car and tack weld it to the side mounts. Chuck the earth on. So that's pretty much how it's looking. Now all it's left to do is to get some side plate action going on. So let's go and put this up on the vehicle and put the side plates on. So what once was a D40 tow bar, that's how it started out its life, is now a custom high clearance NP300 tow bar. It's looking good. There's the chassis right there, and there's the tow bar. It's exactly level with the chassis. So if the chassis bottoms out, the tow bar is bottoming out. But the tow bar will not bottom out before the chassis. Not by much anyway. I mean, I've got these bits here for the shackle chains for the tow hitch, but they're tiny. I mean, if something's directly in that area, maybe they'll bottom out first. But that is pretty high clearance for a tow bar, guys. Okay, that's some tacks in each corner now, guys, so the tow bar is not going anywhere. So just a quick disclaimer, guys, there's probably going to be people asking, did you disconnect the battery on your car? Yes, I did. For good practice, always remove the earth strap off your battery when you're doing any welding on the vehicle. Doesn't matter if you think you've got a good earth on whatever you're welding, if it's a painted or clean metal surface, it's just good practice to do it anyway, guys. Stop you from shorting any of the electrics out on your vehicle. So always remove your earth off your battery, guys. Alrighty, so now that those welds are done, another thing to be mindful of when you're doing a bit of welding as well, things do move around. So when you're doing welding, you put a lot of heat into the metal and it's going to flex and warp and things like that. So it's best to do welding, either stitch welding, do small spots at a time, or say for instance, if I weld this face here, jump onto the opposite side and weld the opposite side then, so it doesn't twist, it sort of keeps it nice and even. That's probably a good tip for anyone who's welding at home, and otherwise you'll go to bolt everything up and it might be a little bit out from what you'd measured or what you tacked in the first place. Might go through and start welding everything up on it now. I'm pretty happy with how it is, and then start getting stuck into the tube side of things. So I've got my tube here, which is one part of this process and probably the easiest part of this process. I've cut my tube to length, or roughly what I think it's going to need to be. I don't know exactly, but I've given myself probably more than I think I'm going to need. So when it comes down to join the two sides together, hopefully it'll just be a case of trimming some off if I've got too much, which is super easy. So I'm not going to do it as one big bend because I don't have a tube bender, and the one that I am using is actually Sean's. He's lent it to me like the legend that he is. In fact, I wish he was here helping me because he is really good at bending tubes and I am not. Anyway, it's vertical to the ground. So basically if I have these bends going this way, I'll end up sort of closing myself out for being able to bend any further. But basically I've measured roughly what I'm going to need in length is 200 long, and that will give me enough to do the 2 bends that I need to. Now there's a bend at the front, it's a kicker, basically kicks out to meet up with the wheel flare or the wheel arch, and then there's a big radius at the back, and that's the main one, which I need to get those 2 distances right. Otherwise it's not going to work. I'm gonna have a kick here and I'm gonna have a radius here that won't match up and it will be out. So I need to make sure I get my measurements right and do the absolute best I can to make all these things meet up properly, and it'll all come together and look amazing, hopefully. So the contour of those bends is actually meeting up pretty well with the tub. Need to definitely drop it down a little bit and get a bit more gap on that bar, but that's easy enough done. I can just move where I position it for the final fitment. But for my first attempt at making a tube bar, I'm actually pretty stoked. Just getting the gap sorted at the moment, trying to make it even. That's pretty much lining up. A little bit of trimming to do on the end there. Corners not half bad. And then there'll be another brace which will come in off this tube here and then onto the chassis in there. So one between those 2 guys to give this section a bit more bracing. So if it cops a hit, it's not going to try and bend up into the panel or away from the panel. It's just going to protect things. I'm stoked, guys. It's looking good. Really keen to get the other side on now. Hey, it's a rebar. So an update on the kickers off the side of the rail on the rear bar, those protection bars that I was going to put on. I've been working on bending a couple of designs up. It's probably more to the point that my bending expertise let me down a little bit here, but I just couldn't get a design that I like the look of. Everyone that I put on there kind of kicked it out too far and it just didn't really suit the setup. So I'm going to leave them off. Every time I took the kickers off, I kind of just looked at the bar and went, hey, I actually really like the simplistic design and the way that it just follows the lines of the vehicle and it looks slimline, but also offers a protection from underneath things coming up and hitting it. So update on that, guys, is I'm going to be leaving them off and just leaving a nice simplistic rear tube bar design. So that's where that's at. So I've whipped some plates onto the chassis with some drilled and tapped holes into them. Now I'm going to weld those plates onto the actual chassis itself, and then I'll have some other plates welded to some tube, which will have bolts going through it straight into those plates, bolting it down. Now the outside of that tube is going to be welded to the actual bar itself, and that's going to act as a bit of a support. So I've just sized up the tube that needs to be put in between that space, cut it down and notched one end of it so it fits around the outside of the tube bar, and then I'll basically tack it into place, do a final fitment, and then fully weld it up, and that will give me enough support on the outside of these tubes here on the outside of the tow bar. So that's both side supports now tacked into place, guys. So that's everything tacked on. The chassis plates are on, the bar's in place, and the top plates are tacked into place, guys. Now, it would be great if I could weld this on the car so that I knew that it didn't move around as I'm welding it, as I'm putting heat into it, but I really don't want to pepper the car and the tires with welding splatter, so I'm going to take it off the car and weld it up off the vehicle, but I'm just going to try and not put too much heat into it so those parts don't warp too much and move around. So I'll probably just do little spots at a time and move around each of the plates and things, weld it up slowly and take my time with it. Then I'll do another test fit, make sure that it all fits into place nice and I don't have to move anything around. Once I've done that, those chassis plates will then get fully welded up and that completes the support brackets, guys. Looks like I got it on just in the nick of time as it was still cooling down, guys. So it's still quite warm to touch now, so it is still cooling down, but everything's going to align up properly, which is good. Okay, so I'm going to call it quits for now, guys. That has been a massive day of rear bar building, a lot of cutting, chopping, and welding, and it's coming up really well. I'm stoked with the fitment of it on the vehicle so far. It's pretty much done. I just need to do a few small little bits and pieces like number plate mounting and stuff like that, but it is a big job, guys. Anything like this, it's custom, is just time consuming. And look, it is just that, it's custom and it's unique to your vehicle whenever you do a custom piece like this, which is always the best part about it. But there is a reason why when people do custom fabrication at workshops and bits and pieces like that, bar work, they do charge so much because it is quite time consuming, but it is unique to the vehicle and it is really worth it, guys. Anyway, thanks a bunch for stopping by and watching this video, guys. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure you smash that one now for me. It helps me continue to make these videos for you guys. Drop the video a like, and if you have any questions, drop them in the comments section below, guys. In the next video for the rear bar, I'm going to resume things with just doing some of those final touches, and then I'm going to paint the bar and do the final fitment. And now that we can off-road again, get out in the bush because COVID restrictions have lifted here in Victoria, I can hopefully do some off-road footage for you guys. It's showing you exactly why we do these rear tub chops and the clearance advantage and all that sort of stuff. So stay tuned for that one, guys. I'll catch you real soon in the next video.